Funding for the production of Louisiana, the state we're in, is provided in part by the Ziegler Foundation of Jennings and Gulf States Utilities, helping Louisiana bridge the gap to our energy future.
People don't realize how serious this disease is.
This man has AIDS.
You know, so much joy has been taken out of my life because of this disease. You know, the physical discomfort, robs me of so much joy.
And this man has AIDS-related complex. I'm Rob Hinton. Tonight on Louisiana, the state we're in, the first of a two-part look at AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, and how this deadly disease is impacting Louisiana. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Louisiana, the state we're in. We'll close tonight's broadcast on a more musical note as Linda Rhodes takes us to the opera to see and hear Rossini's Cinderella. But first, a look at some of the people and events in the news this week. The highway bill was one of the biggest stories. President Reagan vetoed the $88 billion highway bill, which includes a provision allowing states to raise the speed limit to 65 on rural interstates. Earlier this week, the House of Representatives voted to override the veto, but the veto was then sustained by the Senate. The Senate took a second vote yesterday, and this time it too voted to override the president's veto. Now, 7 Louisiana congressmen voted against the president, saying the state needs funding for road projects badly. The only Louisiana representative to side with the president was Baton Rouge Congressman Richard Baker. Baker described the highway bill as a pork barrel of pet projects that will provide for only a very few.
Chicago gets a couple of big expensive parking lots for a subway system that isn't even operational yet. Los Angeles gets 14% of the money. And our state gets $34 million, less than 1/2 of 1% of the pork. That's not even one good piece of bacon for a real hot sizzle. So if you're going to do it in the traditional Louisiana method and try to determine whether this is something where you're really going to be claimed for bringing home the bacon, it's a bad deal. That's not the way I'm going to view it. But I think for those back home who are interested in the politics of the matter, you need to recognize that this is not a good political distribution system for the people of Louisiana. And these are your tax dollars that ought to be distributed fairly because we help put those dollars in the federal account.
Meantime, Baker is one of 4 congressional representatives from Louisiana who is turning down a pay raise granted the nation's congressman. Baker says he plans to turn his newfound wealth back to the Treasury.
I think the method by which the pay raise was granted was entirely inappropriate, and in view of our own economic circumstances at the time, feel that the best leadership position I can take is to exemplify a commitment to fiscal responsibility and will not accept that pay raise.
Baker made his comments before the Baton Rouge Press Club. Louisiana's Environmental Secretary Martha Madden said this week that her department needs $31 million to do its job right. Madden says she will present 2 separate funding packages to the legislature, $19 million to operate DEQ and an additional $12 million in state funds to secure matching federal money for a cleanup of hazardous waste sites and pollution control. There is word that Governor Edwards' trade mission to Japan is showing promise of results, 3 potential projects for the state. Edwards told the State Department of Commerce that Louisiana is in the running for a commercial venture by a Japanese trading company and 2 chemical companies. The governor says one of the projects could be quite large. He said he is working hard to woo Japanese investors and plans to be back in Louisiana tomorrow. Finally in the news, the Oakdale Detention Center opened a new mental health facility this week that will eventually house 300 Cubans. The Cubans came to this country in 1980, many of them just released from prisons and mental hospitals. The federal facility at Oakdale is now devoted entirely to those detainees. Of the 120,000 Cubans who originally arrived, only about 5% still remain in custody, those with mental problems or those who have been arrested since they came to the United States. Next week, Linda Rhodes will bring you a profile of the center and 2 inmates who were arrested selling drugs in this country. AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. This week, President Reagan declared AIDS public health enemy #1. He said that he is determined that we will find a cure for AIDS. Reagan said we'll find a way or make one. So far, there have been over 31,000 cases of the deadly disease reported in the United States. Of that number, over 18,000, that's over half, have resulted in death. Now, AIDS is not confined to the nation's large metropolitan areas like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York. It is here in Louisiana, not just in New Orleans area, but throughout the entire state. As of March 13th, Louisiana had 393 reported AIDS cases. Of that number, 255 have resulted in death. The number of AIDS cases here are increasing, and they're increasing fast. Here is what the AIDS activity in Louisiana looked like in mid-January. As you can see, 35 new cases reported in just 2 months' time, and 26 more deaths within that same time period.
We thought at first, and we knew at first, as we started testing, as we started diagnostic procedures on a organized basis, that we would start seeing increased numbers of cases. But I think now it's even more than that, that these are new recipients of the disease.
Well, we see about a 25% increase every quarter. So about every 3 months we see about a 17 to 25% increase in the number of cases. It appears in looking at our statistics that come into our office, just recently, say since the beginning of this year, particularly within the month of February, we put out a report in the latter part of January, and then we put out another report the first part of March, and we added 30 new cases within about 31 or 32 days.
60% of the documented AIDS cases in Louisiana have come from Orleans Parish, 11% from neighboring Jefferson Parish, 8% from East Baton Rouge Parish, 3% from Caddo Parish, and 2% from Lafayette. But the AIDS activity in Louisiana is not limited to these 5 parishes.
There are cases there is at least one case in probably 40 parishes within Louisiana. Some of those are very rural parishes. Certainly Baton Rouge has had their share. Shreveport has had a number of cases. There have been some cases in Alexandria, Lake Charles, Lafayette. The largest majority of them being in New Orleans because of our large gay male population there.
Homosexual or bisexual men account for over 80% of the AIDS cases in Louisiana. Other groups at risk, high risk, include intravenous drug users, hemophiliacs, and blood transfusion recipients. When national attention was first focused on AIDS, it was thought of primarily as a homosexual disease, the gay plague. But that attitude is now changing. Today, AIDS is affecting more and more members of the heterosexual population.
Well, let's talk just a minute about the national level. This time last year at the national level, only about 1% of the cases were in the heterosexual population. Right now, 4% of the cases are in the heterosexual population. In our own state, we had less than 1% about a year ago, and now we're really close to 2% of our cases. And that seems still very low, but still, that's been within the year. And we know that the trend is toward the heterosexual population coming in contact with this virus. Now, it's not just the fact that you're heterosexual or homosexual, it's your sexual partners. And we have to know that heterosexuals who are promiscuous and having a number of sexual partners or being IV drug users are very likely to come down with the disease regardless of what their sexual orientation may be.
Women account for 19 of the reported AIDS cases in Louisiana. 11 of those cases were reported within the last year. And AIDS has struck 6 children in Louisiana under 13 years old.
We have to look at this disease a little bit different than the male because certainly females of childbearing age can pass the virus on to their unborn child. They might not even know, the adult female may not even know that she has a virus, but certainly even without any symptoms at all, she can pass it on to her child, and the child is very likely to become ill just after birth and die relatively soon because their immune system is certainly not mature at the time that they're born. So I have to say that, you know, in the long run, women have always had to worry about birth control and so forth, so now we're going to have to worry about this disease, and we're going to have to make sure that we know who our partners are and also to use condoms, which you know is a barrier for the virus if it's intact.
So now let's define AIDS. AIDS is the final stage of a serious health condition caused by a virus that can be passed from one person to another during sexual contact and through the sharing of needles. The virus which causes AIDS causes the body to lose its natural defenses against disease. The body then becomes weak and open to attack by several types of rare diseases that do not normally attack a healthy body. It is one of these diseases that eventually kills the person who has AIDS. Not everyone infected with the AIDS virus gets AIDS. Some people remain healthy, while others get a less severe form of the disease. The less severe form is known as ARC, AIDS-related complex.
You know, so much joy has been taken out of my life because of this disease. You know, the physical discomfort, you know, robs me of so much joy. So, you know, right now I'm working at some kind of a way to put back joy in my life, you know, to try and get back joy, peace of mind, and things like that.
Meet David. David is not his real name, but his story is real. David is 25 years old and has AIDS-related complex. About 3 years ago, he was told that he had either lymphoma, leukemia, or even worse, AIDS.
They ran some tests. They couldn't find anything. I continued having the lymph glands being swollen up, and I had some other problems. And then about a year and a half ago, I was told I had AIDS. That diagnosis was modified in June of last year because I didn't have the pneumocystis or the capices, and I was told I had AIDS-related complex. People with AIDS-related complex, about 30% of the people with AIDS-related complex will go on to develop the capices sarcoma or the pneumocystis pneumonia. And there are people who simply die from AIDS-related complex. I mean, when your immune system is under assault for such a long time, you know, a lot of people just give out. So, you know, while AIDS-related complex, you know, many people can die from AIDS-related complex without ever having pneumocystis or capices. So, like I say, when I go to the doctor and I say, you know, what can I expect? You know, he says, he simply has to be honest with me and says, you know, he just says, I just don't know what to expect. I don't know what to tell you.
What were your thoughts when you were first told that you had AIDS?
Well, it was really traumatic, as you can imagine. I mean, when I was first told that I had either leukemia, lymphoma, or AIDS, I was 22 years old. And I was, you know, still in school, and I was just, you know, really traumatized. It seemed totally unbelievable. And you know, I guess I didn't really even take it seriously at that time because, you know, AIDS, you know, 3 years ago was just something that nobody had ever heard of. You know, I certainly didn't think it would, you know, would hit me. You know, I never considered myself, you know, quote, promiscuous, anything like that. I guess, you know, the real trauma was a year and a half ago when they told me, you know, definitively they'd run the HIV test, and, you know, they'd told me for sure that, you know, I had been infected with this virus, and that's what was causing the lymph glands and the other problems. And I remember that time just absolutely stood still. It was like, you know, I was sitting in the doctor's office, and every second became precious. I thought, wow, you know, all this time I've been trying to live for the future and plan ahead, and maybe there isn't a future to live for, to plan ahead for.
What exactly were the changes in your health that made you decide to go see a doctor?
My dad was rubbing my neck one evening, and he started feeling these lumps all over my neck. So that was the first change that I started noticing in my body, was that I did have these lymph nodes swollen up all over my body, in my groin area, the back of my neck, under my arms. Then just strange little things started happening, like I had just a terrible case of warts. I mean, I had warts all over my hands, all over my feet. They would not go away. I finally had to take chemotherapy to try and get rid of these warts. Then I started noticing other things, you know, I'd become frequently sick. What really prompted me to go to the doctor again and get the HIV test was I was having terrible problems with nausea and night sweats and things like that. So it's really a combination of all these symptoms, fatigue, things like that. I do have an enlarged spleen. You know, I just have little things like this going wrong with my body that aren't necessarily, you know, as life-threatening as pneumocystis or capices, but they're certainly very annoying and uncomfortable.
What was your family's reaction?
Through time, my parents both work in a hospital, so, you know, they're used to hearing about AIDS. I guess, you know, the same thing, you know, lots of disbelief, lots of denial, certainly anger towards me, you know, like, what did you do to get this disease? And gradually now, over the years, they've really become much more supportive. And, you know, right now they're very supportive, they're very concerned. And, you know, in a way I feel guilt, like I feel like I've been this terrible burden on my parents, you know, because I know it causes them a lot of anxiety. So, but right now I'd have to say they're extremely supportive of me.
What about your friends?
Friends have been very, very supportive. In fact, you know, it's my friends that have really gotten me through this whole crisis. You know, I guess I'd have to say that basically, you know, people don't understand. And even my closest friends, I mean, they can't relate to what I'm going through. I mean, they can't, you know, because it is, you know, when you're told, you know, that you're going to die or you have a terminal disease, I mean, your life just totally changes and things are never the same as they once were. And, you know, I feel like my friends, you know, which are very supportive, I mean, obviously they can't totally understand because they haven't gone through it themselves. But I just have to say they've been totally supportive. I've had a few people sort of surface acquaintance, not really deep friends, that certainly didn't want to be around me, that were scared of me, that, you know, didn't want to hang around me. But none of my close, dear friends have rejected me at all. It's just been a few people in the periphery of my life. So, you know, I'd really have to say that it's, you know, due to my friends and their support that, you know, that has made such a difference in my life.
One of the hardest things that people with AIDS and AIDS-related complex have to deal with is the social stigma that accompanies the disease.
Because of the stigma that's attached to this disease, it's very difficult many times to work with persons who really need to be counseled, need to be tested. A person fears that if they come in to be counseled and are tested, that their name, the result of their test may get onto their medical record, or it may be subpoenaed by an insurance company, or the place where they work may be able to find out that in fact they are positive for the virus. And there's certainly that's something to worry about, because a number of persons, as you know, have lost their jobs, although they're perfectly capable of working because they're HIV antibody positive. They've lost their jobs, they've lost their insurance. Some of them have been asked to move out of their homes, their houses, their apartments. So there is certainly a social stigma attached to this disease.
And that's the hardest thing about this disease. I mean, if I had cancer or leukemia or something like that, I would have the support of the community. You know, there'd be lots more organizations, you know, I'd be able to tell people at my workplace about it. But with AIDS, I mean, I really feel fear that I'm going to be discriminated. I mean, you hear so much, you know, people have such ridiculous ideas about this disease. You know, people are so absurd about it. And there is so much hysteria surrounding it that, you know, I am afraid of being discriminated against. I mean, all of my close friends know, but certainly nobody at the workplace knows that, you know, that I'm sick, and I wouldn't want them to know just because I'm afraid of, you know, having some sort of ignorant reaction.
People don't realize how serious this disease is.
That's Frederic Garnett. Garnett is a staff psychologist at a Washington, D.C. hospital and a PhD candidate in clinical psychology. About a year and a half ago, he was told he has AIDS.
In many ways, I'm not a typical person with AIDS, or PWA as we often use the terminology. My health has been relatively stable. I still work full-time. I enjoy outside activities, and my stamina is fairly good. But I don't fool myself. My condition is serious, and in many ways it's illustrative of the similar conditions going on in the black community, both here and elsewhere.
At a symposium in New Orleans on AIDS in the black community, Garnett talked candidly about his life since being diagnosed. Next week, we'll have more on his story, and we'll tell you how state health officials are addressing the AIDS problem here. Now, if you would like more information regarding AIDS, contact the AIDS hotline at 1-800-342-AIDS. Next Thursday and Friday, the LSU Opera Theater in Baton Rouge will put on Rossini's Cinderella. Both performances will take place at 8 p.m. in the University Theater. Linda Rhodes went to one of the rehearsals this week. She's here now to tell us all about it. Linda?
Rob, Rossini's Cinderella first premiered in Rome in the 1800s, turning this well-known tale into a comedy. Sung in English, the opera is more than a children's story. The music is complex and lively and will leave you humming. Rossini wrote the entire 3 acts in 24 days. He did take some liberties with the story we all know, but Cinderella ranks with Rossini's other masterpieces, The Barber of Seville and William Tell.
My father king has decreed that I marry. I must fulfill his wishes to the letter.
Cinderella is a story that's been told more than 500 different ways since the time of ancient Egypt. Then an Italian composer put music to the story in 1832 and adapted it for performance.
What is wrong? I was so startled. Do I look like a monster? Yes. No, forgive me. There's a charm I cannot name in those eyes that thrill me so. There's a charm I cannot name. In the shine and tender glow.
He has taken some of the magic out of it and made it more, I would say, plausible, something that could really happen.
We don't have a godmother, but a stepfather who's rather cruel to Cinderella, and of course favors his own daughters. The stepsisters are good-looking girls, but they're cruel in their hearts, rather black in their hearts. And instead of a fairy godmother, we have a character introduced by the name of Alidoro, who is a philosopher and who is the tutor to the prince who eventually finds Cinderella and marries her.
How I love to see her smiling. It makes me hopeful and warms my heart. His gracious, some sweet enchantment and beguiling makes her beguiling. Oh, I love to see her smiling. It delights and warms my heart. It delights and warms my heart. Yes, it delights and warms my heart. Yes, it delights and warms my heart.
Because the opera is sung in English and because we are all familiar with the storyline, Rossini's Cinderella is a good opera to see if you've never been before. The director's approach is to make the opera appealing to people in this century while retaining the substance of Rossini's style.
What on earth is all this noise? What in heaven can it be?
What a hubbub, what a riot, a continuous commotion, not a moment's peace and quiet, in a never-ending whirl.
Her simplicity is charming, her sincerity disarming. I'm in love, I can't deny it, with this angel of a girl.
I must be going, dear sir, forgive me. Coming, coming,
At the ball, it's very decadent. There's a great deal of drinking and debauching and heavy makeup and fabulous clothes and lots of singing and carrying on, and enter Cinderella, who announces that her values are quite different from this, that she's not interested in all of this. She wants a man who will simply love her. She just wants to love and be loved. And I think this is her dream through the opera, and because it's a true and a virtuous dream, her dream comes true.
Have a feeling stronger, that my heart is mine no longer. I have given it away, all at once I have a feeling, we're never growing stronger, that my heart is mine no longer. I have given it away, I have given it away, I have given it away, yes, I have given it, I've given it away.
If you want tickets, or Rob, if you want tickets, they can be purchased in advance at the LSU Union box office.
Thanks, Linda. Looking forward to seeing it. Well, that's our program for this week. Thanks for watching. Next week, we'll have part 2 of our report on AIDS, and Linda will have a report on the Oakdale Detention Center for Cuban refugees. Be sure to check it out. Until then, have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Funding for the production of Louisiana, the State We're In, is provided in part by the Ziegler Foundation of Jennings and Gulf States Utilities, helping Louisiana bridge the gap to our energy future.
You sightsee, you see many things that you haven't seen before, more on the streetcar than you do on a bus. It goes slower and go further places.
What I like about it is that it's very convenient. I live right on St. Charles, and it's just convenient that I can hop on the trolley and come right to class in the mornings.
I think it brings you back in history and gives you an opportunity to relive the past and away from the hustle and bustle of normal type travel.
These people and more than 6 million others ride them every year, down Carrollton Avenue in the city's uptown district to the end of the line, and along St. Charles Avenue past age-old landmarks, mansions, and through the world-famous Garden District. London native Bill Diston has traveled the London Underground, but says the streetcar is the only way to travel in New Orleans.
Is it more convenient to take the streetcar here in New Orleans than to actually drive back and forth if you're going down St. Charles?
In my view, one has to be slightly insane to drive in New Orleans unless one absolutely has to.
That's our show for tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm Ken Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Funding for the production of Louisiana, the State We're In, is provided in part by the Ziegler Foundation of Jennings and Gulf States Utilities, helping Louisiana bridge the gap to our energy future.